George, if you want to take over, I'll be here if you have questions for the audience later. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, John. Hey, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the conference. A sad day, but one that can demonstrate the resilience of all of us as well. So we always remember how to acknowledge that. But I'm really happy that I could present to you today. Let's get going, and I'll tell you a little bit about what we can all do. A lot of this stuff are things that you know about. It's good to see it all in one place, and we've got to get a little bit better in how we're addressing things. So a little bit about me before we get going. I'm the founder of Security Advisors, LLC, risk assessments, pen testing, application security testing. We don't do the cookie cutter reports like the big massive companies do, and we're there for you. I've been acknowledged by ISSA. As a matter of fact, that's the last time I saw Win at the award ceremony, and he followed me. So that's kind of cute. I was a CISO for 15 years, then saw the light. I'm currently the president of ISSA Los Angeles. We actually were the founding chapter of ISSA some 35 years ago or something. I founded the Women in Security Forum out here in Los Angeles, and I did serve a couple of years on the OWASP Global Board. So let's set the stage. There's a heightened environment in security all around. COVID-19 has changed that, but boardrooms at least now have security on their agenda on a regular basis, which is great. Breaches are unfortunately and fortunately for us and our acknowledgement by the board, they're everywhere. They're in mainstream media. Our friends and family now come to us and ask us security and IT questions. In the past, it would just be, hey, help me with my printer, but now it's security questions. So we're in the mainstream, which is about time. Even the government's looking to help out with regulations, but don't look for the government to solve our security problems. They're always behind. Think about every legislation and regulation that's been passed. Congressmen, senators, they don't know security. They have aides that might help, but at least the regulations give us some strength when we go to our board to get some funding, and also for compliance, right? But don't mistake compliance for security. The reality is our data is leaking everywhere. Phishing attacks are multiplying. It's getting ridiculous. Ransomware is up. The average time to contain a breach now, according to an IBM report last year, 280 days to identify and contain the breach, which is crazy. And most of the time, the FBI notifies the company. They don't even have the awareness that they have been breached. I've had conversations, and I'm sure you have too, where your IT director is telling you, well, we haven't been breached. And my argument is, well, how do you know? You know, we're fighting to get the funding for our monitoring tools, and you're telling me you haven't been breached. Does this sound familiar? And the attackers today, they're not like the script kiddies from yesteryear. They don't want to be found. They want to get in, get out, erase their footprints, and get your stuff. And you don't even know it. The times are changing. Right now, there are so many ways for you to be compromised. And these are areas that you have no input or control too often. The medical devices, I used to work in county government and healthcare, and the people that were responsible for the medical devices, they were just going out and buying it and didn't have to vet it through me. So we had to do a search everywhere to find our information, where our data is, the back doors that are being created by plugging stuff into the network. Even the refrigerator and your boardroom TV monitor can be a target. And the FBI has warned consumers as well as companies about these problems. You know, do you have a good IoT strategy as well? You know, IoT problems are still there. I mean, after all these years of IoT, they're still coming out of the manufacturers insecure. It's improving a little bit, but you've got to make sure that you can identify and secure and isolate all those devices on your networks. So what the hell's going on, right? We still are seeing the same old vulnerabilities that we saw when 2007 in the OWASP top 10, we saw SQL injection. It's still up there. OWASP was working on a new top 10, but in the 2017 version, SQL injection was still there. That's absurd, right? There are recognizable ways to solve these problems, and we still see it. Patching is still a major issue. I still have conversations with enterprises, and they go, you don't understand. To patch the whole enterprise on a regular basis is just too difficult. Well, how about breaching and repairing and coming back from a breach? Is that difficult? Change management, we don't see enough of that. Things are brought onto the network, changes are made without the proper management and processes in place. Configuration management, that's not happening on a regular basis. Even printers and copiers are still being installed with the default settings. And so bottom line is our mission critical information is not encrypted and data can be exfiltrated. This is getting better, okay? And the encryption discussion is a lot better today than it was a couple of years ago. Well, the main problem that we seem to be facing now is our workforce likes to go phishing, and they're still clicking on the links, opening the attachments. It's very difficult for a user who is focusing on one thing for their job to think about security all the time. We could try all the training we want, but we do know, yes, we can make inroads, that can help, but there's a lot more that we have to do and not depend on them as the human firewall, all right? And ransomware attacks are occurring every 11 seconds, and 60% of companies go out of business within 6 months of being victimized. So, you know, security awareness is key to your security program, but to just depend on that as far as your workforce is not going to work. A couple of recent breaches to give you an idea of the scope and magnitude. These are all recent. 15.7 million users were compromised thanks to ClearVoice. Park Mobile had 21 million users data compromised. Astoria 30 million. Infinity Insurance, 5.72, a small one. The workout tracking app, Jeffit, 9 million. And of course, I put SolarWinds because that was such a monster one. We're still trying to recognize the extent of that breach. There's still potential for further damage caused. Have they implanted other things on the devices that they had access to? How about the costs for these data breaches? The global average cost of a data breach is up to 3.9, according to the 2019 Poneman report. Extensive use of IoT has increased that cost by $5 per compromised record. If you were to look at a mega breach of 1 million records, that's an average total cost of 40 million. A huge company could absorb that, possibly. Do they want to? How about a 50 million record breach, which is becoming more and more common with the incredible size of our databases? That's a $350 million average cost. Third-party partner breaches can add an extra 370,000. Our partners are definitely an issue, and third-party risk assessments are key. So a little bit security awareness, right? 70% of organizations now say their senior leadership has a comprehensive understanding of cybersecurity or is taking positive steps to improve. Initially, that sounds good, but that means 1/3 of the companies don't have the clue and aren't securing. That's a lot of companies. 77% are still operating with only limited cybersecurity and resilience. And these are part of the EY Global Information Survey from a couple of years ago. 87% of organizations warn they do not have sufficient budget to deal with the security issues and to implement what they need. This is pretty bad situation we find ourselves in, and breaches are increasing, as are the sophistication of the attacks. In the past few years, we've seen that sophistication jump. We remember several of the hacks that have been going on in the breaches. Who can forget all the CEOs of companies coming out saying this was a sophisticated attack? They're finally starting to get there. That was bogus back then. And now every organization is a target. I had discussions with my CIO many years ago. where he would say, well, we're not a bank or finance, but every piece of data has a monetary value on the dark net. So what's a good security leader to do? First thing I recommend, if you haven't done it already, go on tour. Speak at the division meetings and the general staff meetings, make your face known to the rest of your company, go into the different business units, make sure you have security awareness as well for everyone, okay? Don't do what I'm doing, a presentation with PowerPoint. You're gonna lose your audience. Be creative, think of things that you can do. Gamify your training is definitely one of the more important things to do. Pit division against division, have prizes, award things for best security advice, give people a great parking spot for the security person of the month, security champion, if you will. If you're going to do phishing simulations, there's a debate whether that's valuable or not, but I would still recommend it as part of your program. Don't excuse and exclude the executives. They will say, no, I can't be bothered with this. But guess what? They have access to some of the most important data in the company. So, and they also feel they're above the law, if you will. So make sure that they're included. And on every meeting that has the top level folks at your organization, your goal is to get security on that agenda. Patch management, that's number one on my list of technical things that you can do. You make sure you have processes in place for your enterprise-wide patching, okay? First start off with a pilot group before you roll out any patch, so you can test it, make sure, and that pilot group should be comprised of sampling of some of your key apps and key areas, just so you can see if anything breaks or is affected. Third-party apps, very important. I know companies that use let's say the Microsoft product for patching and roll it all out, and they forget all the third parties. But we know that Adobe is not vulnerable ever, right? Minimize the exclusion of systems. You will get, if you haven't already, requests from system owners saying you can't patch our system because it hasn't been tested with the latest thing, or this is a key system, we can't take a chance. But it's really a lot better if you patch and something happens, so it's a controlled event rather than an unforeseen one from a criminal who attacks the system because it wasn't patched. Always, of course, minimize effect of the users, make this transparent. If you do have systems that you're going to have to exclude, and there are cases for this, do your best to have exclusionary processes, so those are isolated systems. For example, set firewall rules that that system can't go out anywhere, that only certain groups of users can go into those systems. They are isolated through segmentation on their own area. VLANs, firewall rules are definitely part of every single good security program. But don't just accept the word of the system owner. Directly contact the manufacturer or supplier of that app and see if you can work with them to see if they can improve their patching and their testing. You will find that due to peer pressure, other organizations, their competitors, they're stepping up their level of security as well. And quite often the information that the system owners have is antiquated, and they're not aware that those things have stepped up. This is particularly the case in the medical field, where all the pieces of medical equipment are tested prior to deployment, and they just sit back and take their time. But the pressure of competition is improving that. So don't just take the word of system owners on that. Meet with your key players, okay? Every company is organized differently. The culture is different. Don't just look at an org chart, because there are key players that have the ear of the C-suite, and you need to get to know them. They need to get to know you. So identify those key stakeholders. Just do your best to have some lunch with key executives and these people I described. It's worth you footing the bill a few times. Human nature, if you pay, they will think they're a little beholden to you in the future. They'll be more on your side. Yes, it sounds absurd, but it's human nature. It happens, and this is well documented. Also, meet regularly with key areas throughout the organization. Obviously, the CTO, but all the division heads. Make your face known. Get to understand them, what their culture is like. Legal and risk can be your best advocates and your best support. They clearly have the ear of the decision makers in every company, and your job, our job, is risk more than anything else. So these are folks. Very important. Talk business ease. I'll talk about that later, but there is a way that you can communicate with the upper level management, and it's not the way that we communicate with each other, where we talk about attacks, the number of attacks. They don't care about that. Good configuration management is an important part of any good security program. Yes, create your standard image, deploy it everywhere, but you have to update it and regularly test it because you're going to make changes on it. And don't forget your system admins. How many times have we heard stories where the admin rolled up a system, built it from scratch, didn't follow the configuration, and lo and behold, he forgot to patch something and there's a little backdoor for your system. So harden all your systems based on that standard image. Get a change management process in place and regularly test it. If you don't have a change management board, form one. Make sure there are key players from application security, field support, systems admin, and network management. All those people need to be on there. And they should be reviewing any change that's not just a regular standard change on a regular basis. And make sure you know how to roll back and test that as well. Policies, procedures, and standards. We all have them, we all know about them, but do yourselves a big favor. In general, policies are a bit harder to deploy than procedures. Procedures you write and certify and they're done. Policies, you've got to go through a lot of levels to get them officially approved for your organization. HR has to get involved. So you don't want to change your policies too often. You want to review them every 2 or 3 years and keep them short. Policy is a statement of what you're going to do, and the procedure is describing how you do it. Because procedures are fluid. As your technology changes, as the environment changes, you will have to change your procedures. So review the procedures regularly, keep them updated. When you build your policies, don't create policies that you can't follow. You can create policies that you're planning to follow with a few updates or changes, but you don't want to be non-compliant with your own policies. All right, but clearly work with HR, make sure they're on board, because at the very least, you want them to require staff to sign the acceptable use policy. A good way to do it is every year or more when users are getting their performance evaluation. Part of the package is the acceptable use policy. A little application security stuff. I shared with you earlier that I was on the OWASP Global Board. I also ran the LA chapter for many years. This is not what a lot of IT and security leaders talk about a lot, but the backdoor at layer 7 is unbelievably dangerous and is all too often the way that seemingly every criminal hack occurs. So what's our key job? Make friends with the head of the application development area. That's really important because their whole focus is different than ours. Yes, they want security, but they're evaluated on how fast and they can get their applications rolled out. That's often, if you're in a for-profit company, that's the way the companies stay in business, by rolling out new apps and building things. And so they're supposed to get those out as quickly as possible. InfoSec's got to be involved in every single one of those rollouts, every software project, and we need to be involved in the beginning, not at the end. Hopefully your company is past the point where we all too often found ourselves a decade ago, where someone gives you a call and says, hey, this app's rolling out tomorrow. You want to take a look at it? Tell me you don't remember that. That was scary. And when you looked at it and evaluated it, it was disaster. Part of your program should be using static and dynamic web app security scanners. The static scanner lives with the developers. It's built into their process. And the dynamic is the one that typically security team will run prior to the deployment of every app. Use software composition analysis tools, SCA, to look for third-party vulnerabilities, because everyone's using libraries. They're out there and the vast majority are insecure. You can also look into a runtime application, self-protection, but automate as much as you can. Hire a pen tester for all your critical apps. You might have one on board, but it's time consuming. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of expertise. But all these automated tools, they have their value, particularly when things are sped up now in the way apps are being rolled out. But you still need someone to manually check code and do some pen testing, because you'd rather you break into your system than somebody else. Now, app dev staff, in my experiences, programmers really want to do the right thing. They want to code securely. But if you look at the curriculums in schools where application developers are getting their degrees, these schools still don't have enough security built into the system. They've got wonderful ways to teach coding and shortcuts and modular modular development, but security is still not a great enough presence on the curriculum. So it's up to us, a little late in the game, but better than ever, to look for training opportunities. I did that for the application development staff where I've worked. They were very interested in getting this training because, again, they want to do secure code, right? Developers are very careful. They want their babies to be good looking and happy. And one way to do that is to make sure they're secure, and they understand that, but they just don't have that background in training, typically. So really look into working as a team with your head of app dev and get that training for them. There's lots of different ways that can be done. You're going to be going up against a bit of resistance schedule-wise, because again, they're all on that fast track, and all their time is supposed to be taken just in development. So any time taken away from that can impact the delivery schedule of an app. So you're going to have to get that the buy-in from your head of application development. If you can get the buy-in from the head of your organization, that's even better, right? But these are things that you've got to do. OWASP can be a great friend for your app dev team, but you need to learn more about OWASP. A decade ago, I looked in the mirror and I said, what do I need to do to improve my abilities and knowledge as a CISO? We should do these checks on a pretty regular basis because technology and everything changes so quickly. I did not have a good background. I mean, a few years of Fortran and BASIC many years ago, that's not going to cut it, right? So I understood some concepts of how coding worked, but I needed to learn more about SDLC and application development. So I immersed myself in OWASP and got very involved there. You should be doing something, if you haven't already, the similar thing. OWASP has tons of free tools, free templates, frameworks that your organization can be using. So if you get blowback from anyone in the dev area about the costs of putting security into your apps, there's so much open source and free tools from all these dedicated people worldwide who are building stuff for all of us to use for free. So that is not an excuse. Don't forget about your physical environment. Some companies have a separation of duties where you've got a head of facilities and then you've got a CISO. Some companies have a CSO, which typically encompasses the physical security. That's a more robust and a better solution. But typically the facilities head does not have the security training that any of us have. And so we've heard nightmare stories about the access cards that are easily copied by someone walking by with a scanner. And those are improving, but there's still companies selling insecure cards. So someone wants to wave the card by the door to get in, and you grab it and go home and put it on your system and make yourself a card. There have been several stories about this. Cameras, I did a scan and found that the security camera that was purchased by our facilities was not locked down because out of the box, they're not secure. It's an IoT device. All right, so think about all the different things that your head of facilities is purchasing. Also, how about the maintenance schedule? Do you have access to that to see, who's coming in and out, what's going on? And do you have processes in place to make sure people don't pick up a PC and walk right out? I would not want to ask you to raise your hand if you do on that particular one. Besides, I couldn't see. Monitor your systems on a regular basis. This is a really crucial part, obviously, but it's not done well enough by a lot of companies. Are you able to detect anomalies on your system? All right. Do you even know if you've been compromised? Looking at that FBI report that it takes 270 days to identify and lock down compromise is really a damning statistic and tells me that most of us don't. Would you be able to detect, for example, if you had outbound traffic to companies or areas of the world that you never deal with and your company has no business with? Things to think about that you can do to help. You see any unusual behavior by any of your employees? What I mean by that is if a normal way that an analyst in a certain area works is basically 9 to 5, handling 50,000 to 200,000 records per day. And all of a sudden, you're seeing reports that they're working in the evening on 1 million records. That should raise a red flag. Now, they might have a legitimate reason for doing it, but it's something you should follow up on and validate with the head of that department. Hey, is this a sanctioned behavior? Is this appropriate? Is this okay? These are things that you should be doing that seem out of place in your organization. Do you have a way to determine that? All right, is there a way to raise red flags for situations like that? Also, we'll see constantly people having problems with their credentials logging in because the whole password structure is garbage, right? We know that has to change. If you want too complicated a password, they're writing it down and putting it by their desk. If it's not complicated enough, then it's too easy for a brute force or a dictionary attack. I mean, we know passwords are problematic, but are you looking for any kind of patterns? So if you get 10 calls to the help desk that a user can't log in or this user can't log in, right? But are you checking at the second level? Do you have somebody monitoring and looking for patterns or behavior to see if you're under attack, right? 100 users all at the same time having problems, or someone made an attempt and then they're forced to change their password. So think about things of that nature. As far as monitoring goes, a lot of companies are looking towards the cloud, looking towards third parties to help them monitor their systems. There's tons of solutions, but just be aware, all of those companies are not created equal. I've talked to people on both sides, my peers, other CISOs who said, we've been saved by these companies because it's really difficult to hire people to monitor as their job. And if it's not their job, you're not doing enough monitoring. So this is a difficult thing to do. There's burnout. Let these companies deal with that. Let them make sure they hire the right staff. And then when those staff need to move on, get someone else. And also they're trained in the latest technologies, so they understand It's a large burden on you and your company to do that training. Many of you want that in-house, and that's fine, and it works if you spend the time and dedicate the resources to do that. I've had other conversations with other CISOs who said, we found areas of problems and activity prior to these MSSPs. So what the hell am I paying these 6 figures for? So be careful before you go out there and evaluate appropriately. One of the best ways is just word of mouth. Talk to fellow CISOs about their experience with different companies. Reporting is a key part of what we do on a regular basis, right? So it's good to run your vulnerability scans, and it's good to clock them. Yes, I check the compliance box. Remediation, don't forget, create the plans and follow up. You're going to have to work with IT on this one, obviously, but they're very busy, and they'll put this in the second tier of their plans as far as importance. But you've got to work with them and get upper management to understand the importance of remediation, and then retest, right? Don't forget, after you do a vulnerability scan, make sure the remediation is done, do another scan. Don't wait. I don't know how often you're scanning. Some companies do it quarterly, others weekly, others on an ongoing basis, but this should be a serious aspect. Also, compare reports from various tools. For example, look at your patch management, vulnerability scanning, and your anti-malware dashboards. If you see systems that are showing up on your vulnerability discovery scan, but they're not in your anti-malware dashboard, such as Symantec or McAfee, then it's showing that the agent is not properly installed on those systems, and you've got a wide open system, so you better get out there. So think about these reports. Correlation is key, and many times agents don't properly install or fully deploy, so there are issues with that. So definitely look at these reports and think of creative ways to find problems in your system where you thought that you were okay because you pushed out the agents. They don't always install correctly. Access management. This is a big one. To get a proper identity and access management system provisioned is a major effort that encompasses various areas of your organization. You need executive management, you need IT, you need system owners, and of course, security. And it could take years to deploy it correctly. So you've got to start with procedures and standards on your own in a manual fashion using a combination of technology and process. An example, we did not have IAM. And so what we would do is contact every system owner, get a report of all the users in each system and their access level. Gave it to the system owner and said, I need you to sign off that all these people still need access and at that same level. People change jobs, people move on, and to have them still having access to systems is clearly inappropriate. Also work with your HR to make sure that you are notified when people leave, and have this as a standard process so you know that you can deprovision their access. One problem, of course, is the deprovisioning in all the different systems that they might have access to. With that on IAM system, it's hard for you to know. So you have to work with the system owners and the division heads because they know where their people are. Multi-factor authentication. I think we're past the point where we can say that's just for the admins. And heaven help you if your admins don't use that. But every critical system that you have, that if your company didn't have access to that system, they would cease to function in a normal fashion or take irreparable harm. Those systems need MFA for everyone. All right. You should also look into the possibility of MFA across the board, but that's a larger fish, and that could be their next phase. Right. Also, for your admin team, they love to log in with their access to everywhere credentials. But what they should be doing, they should be working as a regular user. And then if and when they need to jump in and do some access and management admin work, then that's when they'll need to use their admin privileges, and only then. And that's a tough one to work with. But if you get your admins in a room, maybe a lunch and learn, that might help. Did I mention patch? Yes, I did. For me, this is number one on everything I'm talking about today. Everything. And I think many of you will agree with me. If systems were patched, nothing special, just normal patch, there would have been no Equifax breach. 75% of risk, in my opinion, could be mitigated with just a decent patch management program. Even WannaCry would not have happened if your systems were properly patched. So the best takeaway from all of this today is to huddle with your head of IT and figure out how you can work together to get this done. Try to get through all the excuses of why it's not a good enterprise patching process on a regular basis. Incident response, what's the goal? To minimize the damage, lock it, block it, and stop it. You've got to come up with an incident response plan ahead of time and test it. Too often we see, just like backup, right? Backups or we have backup, we're good, but did you test it? A good incident response plan needs to be tested regularly. Every organization has slightly different threats, so you have to figure out what those are. You have to get the right people on the team. This is not just a security item. This is company-wide. You want finance, public relations, attorneys. If you're breached, only the communications or public relations people should be addressing the media. No one else. Of course, you'll be contacted. Now, this is if it's a high-profile breach, right? But still, they're there. Finance needs to be involved, as I said. And you need to have the right level of communication internally to know who to notify and what to do. So this is important. Having an incident response team reduces the cost of a breach on the average of $360,000, according to the 2019 Ponyman report. So may not seem like a lot of money, but the turmoil that it can cause internal is just amazing. For those of you who've gone through this, you can understand. Encryption, I mentioned it earlier. We are past the point where your data should not be encrypted. We're all encrypting data in transit, but it's time that every piece of data in your organization has encryption. I know that a fellow CISO several years ago told me about someone broke in, picked up the PCs and took them home, and somebody had forgotten to turn on encryption. And so now they had access to all this data. So first, it shouldn't be stored locally. But second, everything should be encrypted. You might have some very creative developers who want to build their own encryption algorithm. No, not acceptable. The reason is, even though that might be different and there might be a release of an algorithm of an encryption that's standardized, there's not enough testing of that, right? So that is a potential way right into your network. Don't get fancy. Use accepted encryption. Key management is a big part of this. I've heard of cases where the key and the data are on the same server. Not the best idea. Rotate your keys. Make sure you know who has access to the keys. Very important that you also check out which protocols are being used in your apps and in your systems. We're still seeing SSL and Telnet, which is crazy. People have been moving to TLS, but are they at a minimum at 1.2? 1.3 is even better. Regular backups. Regular backups are the one thing that can help you recover from a ransomware attack, but only if you've got backups that are not connected to your network. Back it up and pull it off. Now, of course, you want the ones that are there for just regular backups when someone blows away a directory and unintentionally in your organization. But critical data has to be backed up on a regular basis. There are tools now that can do snapshots, so it's ongoing backup, so you're really minimizing any loss at all. As I mentioned, the offsite backup is crucial for many reasons. If something happens at your site, some physical attack occurs, or some unforeseen incident, and we have earthquakes here where I live, and I'm sure there's storms where you are. You want someplace else where you can get your backup. You'll then have to do an evaluation of what your critical data is. And some people are backing up to the cloud. They just took this off their plate and said, you know what, I'm not going to be dealing with this. One thing that I want to point out when it comes to ransomware, as I mentioned earlier, companies are not testing the full restore. So when they go to restore the data after a ransomware attack, upper management is thinking, okay, we'll be back in business. There are cases where it could take a week or two because there's only a certain fixed pipe that the data is flowing through, and there's a lot of data. And that blows away upper management. They had no clue about this. So make sure that this is part of your process, that you've had these discussions with upper management, they understand. And some, I hate to say this, but some organizations do a risk assessment and decide we're not going to have this big spend with security because worst case, we'll just restore. Well, if they know what's involved, they might reconsider their budget for security. And this leads on to disaster recovery plan, of course. Make sure you have an actual organizational structure where key business stakeholders are involved. Your recovery time objective and recovery point objective have to be established. Upper management are the only ones that can be involved in this. This is not a security decision. They have to identify the critical systems. They have to prioritize each system, which one will come back first. Tie this into your business continuity plan. Hopefully your organization has one. Business continuity plan is not a security project, right? Security is involved and is a key player, but don't take that on. That is business plan. And you have to test it. Again, just like incident response, people are not testing these plans often enough. So this needs to be done. Your network, this is what your IT folks think about when they think of security. Just this slide, all the other stuff we've talked about, that's for security practitioners. Have a network architecture plan. I've seen so many companies where things are built on the fly and there's no overarching plan for you to study or evaluate to see what the interfaces are, where the data is, all the touch points. You also need to monitor your firewall performance. I talked about segmentation earlier. That's a no-brainer. It has to be done. And I would recommend hiring an independent network pen tester unless you have someone on board. Too often people will misunderstand the term penetration testing and they'll say, well, we do our vulnerability scans. Totally different. If you want to identify your gaps and vulnerabilities before someone else does, that's a key part of your processes. Your remote workforce have to be secured. I think every company pretty much is now using VPN for remote access, but quite often there are areas of vulnerabilities even with the VPN infrastructure. Think about it. In order to use a VPN, you got to punch holes in your firewall. But what about instead of punching holes in your firewall, which obviously create an issue, you just have some device or system internal polling outwards, looking for anyone who might want to come in. And that way there's no one from the outside coming into a hole. It's only one directional, and that's a little bit better. Also, I cannot believe still how many people that I know and maybe in your workforce who don't understand that just because Starbucks and the airports are giving you Wi-Fi doesn't mean you should use it. Now, if you've got VPN installed on your systems, okay, a lot better. But I try never to use any of those systems. If I travel, I plug my laptop into my phone and I use my phone. It's something that you should stress in your awareness training to your staff. The fact that you're here listening to me, hopefully you are, means that you understand the importance of networking and collaboration. So that's good. Keep it up. Look at the folks sitting next to you and just strike up a conversation with them when I'm done, and try to get their contact info, because the more people that we are engaged with, the more people we know, the better chance that we have of dealing with the collaborative infrastructure of organized crime. Billions of dollars is spent on a regular basis by these organizations to look for ways to hack us, to share their data, to share their tools, to have you buy tools and get maintenance plans. I mean, this is a juggernaut. For us to deal with it just as an individual CISO in an organization is ridiculous to think that we'd have any success. So share your stories. If you want to deploy something, contact somebody first before you deploy it, or purchase a tool. Don't even purchase something unless you decide that it's past muster by your collaboration efforts. Join local organizations such as InfraGard, OWASP, ISACA, ISSA. FBI has CyberWatch out there. There's new groups. Look for meetup. Now again, a lot of this is tough during our COVID environment, but there are still virtual meetings that can happen. So this is really important. And then keep learning. This is a lifetime goal, not just professional goal. But for our purposes, there's so many ways you can get information. I start my morning every day by looking at Twitter, not for the garbage that's posted, because there's always, every day, there's always some good links. There's some good articles about either the latest breach or ways to improve your information security program. Books are still important. A lot of us don't have the time for books, but you should make it part of your regular reading. Take some more classes. You're going to continue to still learn. A lot of great podcasts out there. Some of the people speaking today have great podcasts. So continue with this, and also help prepare the next generation. We are in a crisis right now. There's not enough of us around to fill all the job openings. And yes, part of it is a problem with the way HR lists the job openings. When you see a CISSP required for an analyst position, you scratch your head. Do they really want to fill that position? We know about a lot of the problems with that, but we want diversity in the workforce. We want students to want to work in IT. We want a warm and welcoming environment. We want to support competitions. We want to teach at schools if we can, just, part-time. I've done that. And so help the next generation, but be open towards diversity, which will help tremendously. I mentioned business ease earlier. You want to address executive management on their terms, all right? Do they have the information that they need? Remember, what's our goal? Our goal is not to be traffic cops. Our goal is not to tell upper management what they should and shouldn't do. Our goal is to point out what the risks are in our environment today and what we think can be done to reduce the risks, okay? Make sure that your strategy is matching the business risks, and keep the dialogue about two things: risk and money. That's it, right? Don't go to them with spreadsheets of the number of attacks or the number of attacks you caught. They don't care. Risk and money, that's it. And then there's cyber insurance. Okay, word of caution about cyber insurance. First of all, it's becoming more and more a necessity for most companies, because it's not a question of if you will be compromised, but when. And insurance can help with some of the financial losses associated with that. But many companies today are holding more data than a single insurance company will be willing to insure. So you'll need to get a supplemental insurance with a different company as well. So consider that. A lot of companies are not aware of that. They're painfully becoming aware after the breach, when they're only getting a certain amount of money and half of their financial losses are just a write-off. Additionally, I've seen situations. Now, first of all, every insurance company wants to vet every client first. They want to know what you're doing because they want to know what they're securing and if they even want to get involved with you. So you're going to get a report to complete, which asks you about your security posture. It's a risk assessment, similar to what we would do for a third party, right? So they're asking us, hey, check off what you have and what you don't have. Make sure that you see that report and that upper management just doesn't have somebody fill it out and check all the boxes off. Because what happens, and there are plenty of documented cases about this, you check out every box, we have this, and then the breach occurs. You submit your request for reimbursement from the insurance company. They come out, they check out what happened, what they do an assessment, and they say, wait a minute, you checked off you had all these things in place. You checked off that you test your incident response plan, then you test your disaster recovery plan, but we don't, it's been 3 years since you had any kind of tests. We're not paying you. You lied on your report. This happens. So make sure that you're taking that report seriously. I really want to thank you for your time today. Hopefully you got some takeaways from this. Again, as I said, a lot of this information is stuff that you know, but to see it all in one place could help. If you want to reach me, that's my contact information. Again, thank you so much. If you have any questions, I'm here. If there's some way to get those questions to me. But I hope you're all enjoying yourself today at the conference. Let's see here. I don't see anything in the chat. So I think I will then bid you all adieu and wish I was there with you, but hopefully you're having a great time. So take care. Bye.